It was a rant at first sight, but now having gotten to know the camera a little bit better, it's turning ever so slightly, on a daily basis, ever so slowly, to love. I'm talking about the Minolta XGM. Released in 1981, the X70, yes, that's what it was called in Japan, take note Fuji, the XGM was the top line of the XG series of SLRs made by Minolta. It is a very solidly made 35mm SLR camera with a classic black and chrome finish. The chrome bit is not all metal though. Actually, it's mostly plastic, but it's really solid plastic. The XGM was at the cutting edge of electronic camera technology of its time. Simply, it is an aperture priority automatic camera with a battery-dependent full manual operation. Being an SLR, of course, any compatible lens could be used with this camera. However, the kit lens that I have anyway is the Minolta MD 50mm f1.7 prime lens. The aperture range is between f1.7 and f22, with half stops between f2.8 and f16. There is a nice grippy focusing ring with a clear distance scale. The lens is attached to the camera body by aligning the red indicator on the lens with the red indicator on the camera lens mount and rotating clockwise until locked in place. The lens is removed by pressing the lens release button and rotating anti-clockwise. Around the lens barrel are also the shutter release socket, the stop down button, the X-Sync terminal and self-timer switch. The Minolta XGM takes a standard 35mm film, which is loaded in the back of the camera. The back of the camera is opened by pulling the rewind lever upwards. Once loaded, the film is advanced with the film advance lever. Once wound, the lever is locked until the shutter is released. Next to the film wind lever is the frame counter, which resets when the camera back door is popped open and closed. The ISO dial and the exposure compensation dial are right underneath the film rewind lever. To set the ISO, the black ring around the dial is lifted and rotated to the desired setting. To set exposure compensation, there's a control release button, which allows the dial to rotate when pressed. The XGM has an electromagnetic shutter release system, which makes it battery dependent. There is an on-off switch under the shutter speed dial. Available shutter speeds are from 1 second to 1,000th of a second, including bulb. The shutter speed dial itself is free moving in 360 degrees, but it locks when it reaches the A position. I'm not quite sure what A stands for, if it's auto exposure or aperture priority, but either would be correct, I guess. To unlock it from A mode, there is an auto setting release button right next to the dial. This button also doubles as the battery check button. The shutter release button itself is flush against the dial, that is, it doesn't protrude out like most shutter buttons do. It isn't threaded, so it doesn't accept soft release buttons or shutter release cables. This is fine because there is a dedicated shutter release socket as mentioned earlier. The socket accepts both mechanical and electronic signals. Minolta included a very nice touch switch function to the shutter button. At the touch of a finger, the light metering is switched on. Very nice. If you're wearing gloves and can't contact the button directly with your finger, pressing the button slightly also has the same effect. If the self-timer switch is turned on, the battery check light blinks until the photo is taken. The light meter, the shutter, and the self-timer are powered by two LR44 type or equivalent batteries. The battery compartment is at the bottom of the camera right next to the tripod socket. Also on the bottom of the camera are the rewind button and the port for attaching motor drives. The various motor drives and their functions and features are beyond the scope of this video, but note that this camera is capable of auto frame advance and a continuous shooting mode at 3.5 frames per second. There is a hot shoe on top of the camera for attaching accessories such as flash. There is a sync socket as mentioned earlier if your flash gun has that function. The X-sync speed is at a 60th of a second. Composing with this camera is through the viewfinder, which is very large and clear. Shutter speed information is viewable in the viewfinder. In auto mode, the LEDs indicate the select shutter speed. In manual mode, the LEDs indicate the suggested shutter speeds as well as an M to remind you that you're in manual mode. There are also the overexposed and underexposure indication LEDs. There is a split image focusing spot which is surrounded by a microprism band. This is really nice, it makes for really accurate focusing. The selected aperture is also visible in the viewfinder, which is very handy. In aperture priority mode, you basically don't need to take your eyes off the finder at all. Okay, pros and cons. If you've seen my rant video about the battery dependency of this camera, then you already know this one. The shutter release system is electromagnetic with no mechanical fallback. This means without a battery, or if anything were to happen to the electronic circuit, the camera is dead. Simple as that. Dead. This is a shame because this camera is so well built. Anyway, to see my full rant, see the link in the description. On the positive side, as I have now spent some more time with this camera, I have come to understand and appreciate why Minolta, and other manufacturers for that matter, designed the shutter in this very way. Technology. There were some exciting technological advances that could only be implemented in a cost-effective way with an electronic shutter system. One of such is the very nice touch switch system. I really enjoyed the subtlety of the shutter system and the smooth advanced lever action. It made taking photos a pleasure. What about the photos? Well, as usual, the photos are heavily dependent on the quality of the lens and the choice of film. The lens I have on this camera is a good one, like most nifty 50s from reputable manufacturers like Minolta. Yes, it's slightly softer at f1.7, that's for sure, than it is at f4. But really, you'd have to be looking for it to tell. And anyway, you could always grab a better lens if it bothers you that much. The viewfinder magnification is 0.93, so that's about 93% of the film frame area. What that means is that everything you see in the viewfinder will be on the film, and a little bit more. But that's okay. If you have that in mind, you can compose for what you need, and you can always crop off the excess, if you want it to be 100% precise. And when it comes to framing and cropping, remember, it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. Until next time, adiosas.